All thoughts and opinions expressed on WRHU's Queerly Informed do not reflect the views of Hofstra University, the Board of Trustees, or Radio Hofstra University. All contrasting thoughts or suggestions can be sent to programming@wrhu.org or to room 127 Herbert Hall, 111 Hofstra University, Hempstead, New York, 11549.
Welcome to the first installation of Season 4 of Queerly Informed.
I'm Bryana Neff.
And I'm Camryn Bowden.
And we'll have all the latest in international, national, and local LGBTQ news.
360 anti-LGBTQ+ bills have already been tabled for 2026 across the U.S., with January only just ending.
Don Lemon is arrested and charged with federal civil rights violations over a protest in Minneapolis.
2025 Pride was recorded as one of the most dangerous on record in United States history.
And more.
In queer entertainment, I'm Kaylee Desmarais with more on Tamagotchi Life, the new Rocky Horror Show Broadway cast, and a star criticizes the National Hockey League.
For gay history, I'm Minta Sloan. We have more on the founding of the Transgender Europe Council. Stay tuned to find out more.
For your Queerly Informed Sports Report, I am Brooklyn Dottin, with more on warnings being given to queer and trans soccer fans ahead of the 2026 World Cup being hosted in the United States.
Thank you for joining us today. Let's get into the headlines. The American Civil Liberties Union, or ACLU, has reported that in the first month of 2026, over 360 bills that would directly harm the LGBTQ+ community have been proposed by U.S. state legislators. These proposed bills threaten LGBTQ+ rights from several crucial areas, including limiting access to gender-affirming care, banning inclusion of topics involving the LGBTQ community in school curriculums, and forcing schools to out trans students to their parents. Since 2023, over 2,000 bills targeting the queer community have been proposed in state government, with 616 of them being in 2025 alone. 211 have been passed into law, with 74 of them being passed just last year. So far in 2026, the amount of anti-LGBTQ bills proposed across the country is already more than half of the amount from last year, putting the rights and freedoms of queer and trans people in danger.
So this is obviously a very scary thing to start off the year kind of understanding and knowing, but it's also not surprising given the progression that we've seen in the United States over the last year of the second Trump administration, first year of the second Trump administration. This administration has been the most diabolical when it comes to queer and trans rights out of most any other presidential administration in U.S. history. And the fact that the president is so open and so vocal about his anti-LGBTQ+ beliefs, really his anti-trans beliefs, I think has almost given the sort of green light or go-ahead to Republican legislators, conservative activists, advocates across the country who are not in support of queer and trans people to go ahead with this progression of increasing at an exponential rate the hatred and legal destruction and erosion of queer rights as a whole. And it's a very scary trend to see because we are really only 1 year into the Trump administration, the second Trump administration. That means that we still have 3 more years where things can really only go worse from here. And that's a really scary thing, but it illuminates the fact that we as a population, as a community, need to be more vocal about, our dislike, our lack of support, our, protest against this administration. Because if we stay silent and we don't resist this kind of behavior from our president, from our legislators in, the U.S. House and the U.S. Senate, as well as in state legislatures across the country, we will be steamrolled. And that is a very scary thing.
Kind of on that point, it seems like, at least in my personal experience, ever since the 2016 election, this has been something that's normal. So people don't really feel the need to kind of stand up and take action because this is just what political people do. This is just what people in power do, which is a really, really sad norm that we have now. And it's something that needs to change if we ever want this to change.
And it's also interesting to me because I remember thinking back to 2016 and thinking how analysts, people who were in the political realm who have been doing this for a long time were like, Well, now that, gay marriage has been legalized, the Republicans need to pick on someone new, some kind of new target. And for our understanding, even looking back to when we first started this show in 2024, we thought it was trans people. Under the Biden administration, even trans people were being regulated against across the United States. But now it's very clear that trans people are not the thing. It's not just trans people, it's queer people as a whole. It's those who don't subscribe to that kind of, Republican conservative ideology. That's the target of this administration.
And I do not even think that, I agree with you wholeheartedly, but I do not even think that just because gay marriage has been legalized over 10 years ago, that I do not even think that makes gay people even safe from persecution, from being targeted, especially in the legislative sense, because the Supreme Court has considered overturning the landmark decision that legalized gay marriage. That now they have not really been successful in that, at least as far as I can tell. But the fact that they are actually going after that is that it is quite scary.
I mean, I want to just end on one point, specifically on the gay marriage issue, that there are approximately 30 to 31 states that have dormant statutory or constitutional bans in place, where essentially once the Supreme Court overturns gay marriage, 30 to 31 states across the United States will instantly ban gay marriage and will instantly stop recognizing gay marriages as legally binding. Former CNN anchor and current independent journalist Don Lemon has been arrested by federal authorities in Los Angeles last Thursday and has been charged with, quote, conspiracy to deprive rights and interfering with religious freedoms by the Justice Department. The Department of Justice had threatened to pursue charges over Lemon's coverage of an anti-immigration customs and enforcement protest at a Minneapolis church on January 18th, a protest sparked by the pastor's alleged connection to the agency. This protest was one of many that erupted following the fatal shooting of Renee Good by an ICE agent and the fatal shooting of Alex Preddy by Customs and Border Patrol agents, all amidst ICE increasing unpopularity in the city and across the United States. According to New York Times Siena College polling taken between January 12th and 17th, 61% of all respondents feel that ICE is going, quote, too far, including 94% of Democrats, 71% of independents, and 19% of Republicans.
When the story broke last week, and I heard about it when it broke, I was honestly not all that surprised, more just disappointed and sad with the direction that things are going with ICE sort of infiltrating a lot of American cities. And I think it's really scary that journalists don't feel necessarily safe to continue practicing in this country and report on what's going on, because I think it's more necessary than ever that we're reporting on what's going on. And at the beginning of this administration, when ICE started becoming more prevalent and showing up across the country, people were saying, you don't have to worry if you're not illegal, or you don't have to worry if you're not a criminal. But it really doesn't seem like that's true at all anymore. American citizens are getting taken by ICE. People who are being racially profiled but have been born here and lived here their entire lives are being taken. People that just simply don't agree with the Trump administration and what ICE is doing are being illegally arrested, disappearing. People don't know where they are. And I think it's more important than ever that we speak up against this, like Camryn was saying with the last story, and that we don't remain silent about this. We don't accept this as normal, because at this point, if a journalist who's simply covering what's going on and appearing at protests isn't safe, then none of us are safe.
This even goes beyond the ICE conversation, really. I think this is another example of how the Trump administration has been kind of targeting journalists for doing stuff that the administration does not really like, and I just think that that is important to not glaze over, because journalists because the sort of work that journalists do is crucial to a thriving democracy, and obviously, or perhaps not obviously to many, we have not really been seeing too much of that as of recently. And this, coupled with the issue around ICE, of the ICE protests and over what ICE has been doing to not only immigrants but also U.S. citizens, that just creates a really messed up soup of just I don't want to say a failing democracy, although it does seem like that, but it is certainly not conducive to a thriving one.
Yeah, I think that looking at some of the images and pictures and stories coming out of Minneapolis right now is some of the most devastating pieces of reporting I've seen. The story that comes to mind when I think of, just how different Trump essentially advertised ICE's activities to what they're actually doing is the detainment and deportation of that 5-year-old, Liam Canejos Ramos. The reporting coming out of that stuff, seeing the photos of ICE agents taking him in that little blue hat as a 5-year-old is just so gut-wrenching. And it's such a struggle to me to try and talk to my conservative relatives who think that what ICE is doing is right and what ICE is doing is, on principle. And at the end of the day, the advertising that Trump had for ICE was that they were going to deport, undocumented criminal immigrants, people who came to the United States and were committing crimes with the United States. I truly cannot fathom any person who could defend the detainment and deportation of a 5-year-old, child in his little blue hat in freezing weather. It's just so like, what? What are we doing kind of moment. And it's so sad.
A recent report from LGBTQ advocacy group GLAAD revealed that 2025 Pride was one of the most dangerous for LGBTQ Americans since Pride's beginning in 1970. In June 2025, 268 separate anti-LGBTQ incidents were reported across the United States, including 128 acts of vandalism, 76 violent assaults, 22 threats of mass violence, and 15 instances of attempted arson. These hate crimes against queer people rose 400% from June 2024, displaying a worrying trend of anti-LGBTQ attitudes nationwide over the past year. GLAAD's president and CEO, Sarah Kate Ellis, attributes this uptick in violence to the American political climate, with American politicians proposing anti-LGBTQ legislation and promoting harmful rhetoric towards queer people at unprecedented rates. Ellis called upon Americans to, quote, refuse to accept a country where our neighbors fear for their safeties, and to, quote, join together in a united call against the violence and harassment that too many LGBTQ Americans face. So this is obviously a really sad story, and it just shows how much hate against the queer community is really manifesting into physical acts of violence and genuine hate crimes against people just existing and just trying to celebrate. And especially during Pride Month, it's always really sad and heartbreaking to see so much threatening and violence against queer people. And I wonder how this is going to affect this year's Pride in 2026, because as we're seeing with ICE, as we've talked about, when people get angrier and more things keep happening, that just empowers more people to go out and protest, and then it empowers more people to take a stand against what's going on. So I'm wondering if we're going to see a similar trend with Pride 2026, where we see bigger numbers than ever before, and people are more empowered to go out and celebrate, or if people are going to be scared by these figures and not want to publicly celebrate at all.
Absolutely. And I went to my first Pride this year in New York City, and it was such a great experience. It was a lot of fun. I got to hang out with people who, were allies and friends of the queer community. And it honestly, days like those kind of give me hope, seeing how many people show out and show up. And it's just so much, love and joy and just happiness on those kind of days when you see like tens of thousands of people, lining the streets of New York, celebrating the queer community, seeing so many like groups and organizations kind of, even though we don't like rainbow capitalism, but seeing companies even continuing to, be in support of the queer community, especially as a rollback in DEI initiatives was seen last year, it does give me hope. But then hearing this, scares me because I had a lot of fun, but there are people across the United States who didn't have fun. There were there was violence, there was attempts at, trying to scare off Pride celebrations, and that's so scary because these days should be a time for us to like I mentioned earlier, be vocal, be open, be out, be proud. But if there's going to be an increase in mass violence threats or, violent assaults or vandalism or any kind of crime that is meant to try and scare us away, it worries me because those moments are supposed to be good for our community and good for us as a population. But it's scary if they want to try and if there's groups, if there's actors, if there's bad faith actors who want to try and push that back and push that down,
Next up, we have our entertainment and history reports with Kaylee Desmarais and Minta Sloan.
This past Thursday, Nintendo shared a closer look at Tamagotchi Life Living the Dream, a long-awaited sequel of simulation game Tamagotchi Life. Features of the new game will include players being able to make their characters, or Miis, male, female, non-binary, or any combination of the three. Additionally, players can customize the dating preferences of their Miis. Last week, the full cast of the Broadway revival of the Rocky Horror Show was announced. The new cast includes Rachel Dratch as the narrator, Andrew Durand as Brad, Amber Gray as Riff Raff, and Stephanie Hsu as Janet. Other cast includes Juliette Lewis, Josh Rivera, Harvey Guillen, Michaela J. Rodriguez, and Ania, to name a few. Earlier this year, Luke Evans was announced to play iconic character Frank Infurter. The musical will begin previews March 26th with opening night on April 23rd. Last Tuesday, in an appearance on The Kelly Clarkson Show, Heated Rivalries' Francois Arnaud said it's crazy to think there are no out players in the NHL. I hope the league that is now using the show for tweets and Instagram posts and selling tickets that actually follows through and supports openly in the league and in the players. As of 2026, the NHL remains the only major men's sports league without any out gay players, and in 2023, the NHL banned players from wearing LGBTQ plus pride-themed jerseys. Arnaud expressed his desire for the NHL to support the queer fans that Heated Rivalry has now drawn to the sport. For your queerly informed entertainment break, I'm Kaylee Desmarais.
This week in Queer Past, the first Transgender Europe Council was formed in Vienna. On February 2, 2005, the Transgender Europe Council, TGEU, formed to protect trans and gender nonconforming individuals from discrimination and unfair laws and protect their well-being. The organization also runs the Trans Murder Monitoring Project, which records and reports the violence committed against trans individuals, as many mainstream media outlets do not report on this information. TGEU is a European third sector today and is still fighting to protect trans rights with over 200 organizational members and 258 individual members across 49 countries in Europe and Central Asia. More information about the organization and their projects can be found at tgeu.org. For your queerly informed history lesson, I'm Minta Sloan.
Thank you to Kaylee Desmarais and Minta Sloan for those reports.
Welcome to this week's Trans Newsbreak.
Lawmakers in Florida have advanced 2 bills which combined would make it a third-degree felony for medical providers or state employees to assist minors in getting gender-affirming care.
The legislature has also advanced a third bill which could limit queer youth from accessing mental health hotlines or crisis services in the state.
The state Senate bill also allows for civil liability claims to be filed against medical providers or state employees who have violated Florida's Don't Say Gay law, including fines of up to $100,000.
The Supreme Court of the United States appears inclined to uphold state laws that ban transgender girl athletes from taking part in women's sports at the high school and collegiate level.
The 6-3 conservative majority court heard over 3 hours of oral arguments in 2 separate cases, one from Becky Pepper Jackson challenging West Virginia's state law, and one from Lindsay Hecox challenging Idaho's law.
During arguments, the conservative slanted justices appeared to not find the laws in violation of the 14th Amendment to the Constitution or Title IX of the Education Amendments of 1972.
U.S. Hockey, the governing body for ice hockey in the United States, amid the craze of the gay romance ice hockey TV show Heated Rivalry, has banned transgender athletes from playing hockey according to their gender identity.
In the newly discovered policy document, the organization adopted a new participant eligibility policy in November that restricted trans athletes' participation in the sport.
The previous policy, adopted by USA Hockey in 2019, allowed trans women and girls to participate in women's competitions after 1 year of testosterone suppression.
Britta Curl-Salime, a player for the U.S. women's national hockey team and a member of the Pacific Women's Hockey League, faced backlash over her collaboration with an anti-trans sports organization.
Curl-Salime posted an Instagram video sharing her Sunday game day routine, including attending a Catholic Latin Mass and reading the Bible, and tagged anti-trans sports group Fierce Athlete.
The group, on its website, quote, empowers female athletes to thrive in their God-given identity and femininity. The post was liked by a number of other U.S. women's hockey players and PWHL players.
Under a federal court ruling, the Department of Justice has agreed to abandon its efforts to obtain medical records of thousands of transgender patients in Los Angeles clinics and hospitals.
This includes over 3,000 patients the department has agreed to stop pursuing, which originally stemmed from an investigation into healthcare fraud.
Attorney General Pam Bondi said the department demanded the details of young transgender people and their parents and guardians to stop a, quote, warped ideology.
A group of transgender Girl Scouts have sold over 71,000 cookies from the annual campaign by independent trans journalist Erin Reed.
Reed compiles a list of trans and non-binary kids who are a part of Girl Scout troops and has done so since 2022, and asked members on her Substack to buy a box as a part of a fundraising drive effort.
In just 3 weeks, at a price of $6 per box, the drive generated at least $427,000 for the trans and non-binary scouts. A truly heartwarming story.
The fact that Florida lawmakers have actually advanced a bill that wants to limit queer youth from accessing mental health hotlines or crisis services is truly deplorable, because providing those services for queer youth actually saves lives, because the suicide rate amongst transgender and otherwise queer people is significantly higher than among their cisgender counterparts. So the fact that Florida lawmakers are trying to are essentially taking away basically a lifeline for that vulnerable demographic, and just like specifically limiting queer youth from accessing them is just wrong.
On the hockey stories, there is a lot of actually surprising things that come out of the PWHL, because it has been seen as a safe space for a lot of queer women, especially in a sport that is so male-focused, male-centered. And so the fact that they have been promoting anti-trans ideology is very, very heartbreaking, honestly, because if we can't have a space that is open for all queer individuals, then it's not really open for any queer individuals. I mean, there's over 30 openly queer players in the 2025 to 26 season, including a actual married couple on the Montreal Victoire. And then there's also Hillary Knight, who is now on the Seattle Torrent, who she is openly gay. She is married to a woman who is also a speed skater. And it's just very shocking in all reality. And then also with the PWHL, there have been nights that are representation nights. There have been very specified games that are meant to bring awareness to certain topics, and being they promote being such an open place and such a welcoming place for everybody, especially seeing as it's a very fast growing league. They're hitting new fan records every single night, every single game. So I think that I want to give as much benefit of the doubt of people supporting the people on their teams, other players supporting their teammate, but you can't support problematic ideologies and harmful ideas.
And I always want to end off the trans news break. I try my best to find stories that are nice and heartwarming, because there is so much sad news that comes out. I feel like this show is so doom and gloom sometimes, but $427,000 raised for trans and non-binary scouts across the U.S. That is so, so sweet, so heartwarming. I mean, I think that stories like that are some of the shining points, I guess, right now. In such dark times, you kind of have to look for some of the brightness, and most of the brightness nowadays I feel comes from the court system, because the court system is not entirely sold on the Trump administration's ideology. But then you also see stories independent journalists creating lists of trans and non-binary scouts and generating, $427,000 for them. It's so sweet to see. And if there are listeners out there who are looking to purchase Girl Scout cookies and eat an entire box in a day like I have done already this year, you can find more about these trans and non-binary scouts at aaron-in-the-morning.com/p/trans-girl-scouts-on-cookie-list. But with that, before we end off our show, here is Brooklyn Dottin with your Queerly Informed Sports Report.
A growing number of queer-focused supporter groups are advising queer soccer fans from Europe to not attend this year's FIFA Men's World Cup, which is being held in the U.S., Canada, and Mexico. It was announced that the U.S. would be among the 3 host countries for the soccer tournament back in 2018. With his 2025 return to office, President Donald Trump has signed a number of executive orders targeting the queer community, restricting access to gender-affirming care for transgender youth under 19, and banning transgender women and girls from women's sports. There has also been concern about the increasing activity of the U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement, or ICE. England-based queer soccer supporter group 3 Lions Pride has announced that it would be boycotting the FIFA World Cup due to concerns over the U.S. violating human rights, and other such groups have advised its members against traveling to the U.S. to watch the tournament. The FIFA World Cup will take place from June 11th to July 19th. So the U.S., in the article that I read of this story, the U.S. dropped. It said that the U.S. dropped from 41st place in 2024 to 48th place in 2025 for queer safety conditions on the Spartacus Gay Travel Index. Like, of course, organizations are telling people not to travel to the U.S., especially not for a sporting event. And I doubt that they are. I mean, when sports fans organizations are outright advising against traveling to the U.S. because of how dreadfully it treats queer people, you know that things are bad. Like sports is supposed to be fun and a form of escapism and just like kind of a way to, compare how well humans can push our limits and that sort of thing. You know what sports is about. When even that is impossible due to the dreadful treatment of not just queer people, but like all U.S. residents and visitors, especially with both the situation with how queer people are being treated in this country, and with the ICE situation, like how ICE is targeting basically everybody at this point, you know that something is wrong. For your Queerly Informed Sports Report, I am Brooklyn Dottin.
Thank you for tuning in to Queerly Informed this week here on 88.7 FM, Radio Hofstra University, Spotify, YouTube, and iTunes. Thank you to the entire Queerly Informed team for your work on this week's edition.
Join us back here next week to hear the latest in queer news, as well as commentary from our group of LGBTQ reporters.
As always, if you have any suggestions for stories or content that you'd like to hear, send them our way through email at queerlyinformedwrhu@gmail.com.
Thank you again to our entertainment reporter today, Kaylee Desmarais, our historian, Minta Sloan, and our sports reporter, Brooklyn Dottin, for their work on today's show.
For Queerly Informed, I'm Camryn Bowden.
And I'm Bryana Neff.
Thank you for tuning in.